In the world of hair care, very few brands have made as much of an impact as Olaplex, but before it became a staple in salons and home routines worldwide, it started with a garage, a hot plate, and a scientific breakthrough that would change hair care forever. From there, the brand became a favorite of celebrity stylists, achieved cult status on TikTok, and became the best-selling hair care product in the world. But that success wouldn't last forever. After social media helped build the brand up, it would just as quickly help tear them back down. Today, we'll talk about how Olaplex became so popular, how they got dragged into lawsuits and controversies, and whether or not they can survive the backlash. Chapter 1: Origins of Olaplex. Olaplex's story starts with founder Dean Christou, who surprisingly didn't actually have like a direct background in hair care or science at all. In fact, he has spent 20 years running a skateboarding and clothing company alongside his wife, companies I should say. However, he did have some connections to the hair care world. His father was a beauty distributor, his mother ran her own salon out of their home, and his brother had already landed 2 hair care brands of his own. You could say that hair care just happens to run in the family. So when he finally decided to move away from skateboarding brands, hair care just seemed like the natural progression. And after 5 years of development, he and his wife Darcy launched Liquid in 2009, a science-driven hair care line that used nanotechnology to help key ingredients penetrate hair more effectively. This first foray into the hair care world was reasonably successful, but it wasn't anything game-changing. There were already a couple of popular brands on the market using nanotechnology in a similar way, so standing out was difficult. A couple of years later, Liquid was doing okay, but Dean was ready to try something else. Something that would impact the hair care industry on a massive scale. Dean had been inspired by a chance meeting with 2 doctors who had developed a silicone coating which helped prevent your body from rejecting medical implants. He wanted to develop something similar but for hair care. Quite what that means I'm not entirely sure, but apparently that's what he was going for, right? But after 3 long years of experimentation, as well as using up the majority of their savings, Dean was close to giving up. So as a last resort, one of the scientists who had been working with on the project told him that if there was one person on the planet who could help him solve the problem, it was Dr. Craig Hawker, who was a pioneering researcher at the University of California in Santa Barbara. Dr. Hawker wasn't a hair care expert, but he was one of the world's leading chemists. He very quickly solved all of Dean's problems, all the problems he'd been having with his silicone-based hair care idea in the first meeting, but that's not what we're interested in here, because after he solved that problem, Dr. Hawker asked Dean what the holy grail of hair care would be. Dean said that if someone could come up with a way to stop chemical treatments from damaging hair, that would be something really impressive. And Dr. Hawker was like, I'll have a think about it and give you a call if I come up with anything, basically. But just 10 minutes after leaving Dr. Hawker's office, Dean got a call from Hawker saying that he thought of something already, and he had to come visit him the next day. So they met up the next day at the home of his research partner and colleague at the UC Santa Barbara, Dr. Eric Presley, I'm gonna go with. When Dean met the 2 scientists the next day, he found them in Dr. Presley's garage, which along with the usual surfboards, lawn chairs, and other normal items in the garage also contained a DIY laboratory. The 2 doctors presented Dean with what he described as a jar of beer-like liquid, which they had apparently cooked up on a hot plate in Dr. Presley's garage, literally the night before. They told him that this ingredient would solve the problem of hair damage. Just like that, after years of research and experimentation, which had been going nowhere, in the space of just 24 hours, Dean had not only been given the solution to his original problem, but he'd also been given the ingredient which would change his life and the future of the hair care industry forever. Dr. Hawker and Dr. Presley had discovered a groundbreaking ingredient called bis amninopropyl dichloride marmalate. I'm not even going to attempt to try and pronounce it, but this is it here. And unlike traditional hair treatments, which just kind of like coats the hair, giving you this temporary smoothness, this new compound worked on a molecular level, actually rebuilding the bonds that give hair its strength. Even hair that had been damaged from years of bleaching, coloring, and heat treatments could be repaired using this new discovery. Chapter 2: Dominating the Market. Things started to move pretty quickly for Dean now. While Hawker and Presley continued testing, experimenting, and refining their discovery, Dean was busy designing the packaging and working on how to brand his new product. After just a few months of work, they were ready. Olaplex launched their first product, Bond Multiplier #1, in June of 2014, and their big break came almost immediately. Dean had a lot of connections in the hair care world through his family, and one of those connections was celebrity colorist Tracy Cunningham. Dean said that after a 30-minute meeting one rainy night in Beverly Hills, I gave Tracy a bottle of Olaplex, and she used it the very next day on Gwyneth Paltrow and Jennifer Lopez. Tracy told me that she would never color again without it. That's when the real work began. Why are Jennifer Lopez and Gwyneth Paltrow always in my videos? Cunningham herself has backed this up, saying, I was the first person to get my hands on Olaplex in color, and it was very exciting because in our industry, there aren't a lot of aha moments. There are a lot of new products coming out, but you get a lot of, I had this new shampoo and it has argan oil in it. She says, we're not reinventing the wheel, but Olaplex created a whole new category. For the next few weeks, Dean, Hawker, and Presley made over a liter of Olaplex every day just for Tracy Cunningham. Just for her alone. They were still making it in Presley's garage at this point, and Dean would make the 2-hour drive to Cunningham's salon himself each day to deliver it. And it didn't take long for other celebrity colorists and stylists to catch on. Soon, people like Guy Tang, Aura Friedman, Michelangelo, and so many others were using Olaplex on their famous clients, which included the Jenners, the Kardashians, Salma Hayek, Lady Gaga, and an endless list of models and actresses. With this kind of buzz building up around the brand, Olaplex wouldn't remain an industry secret for much longer. Soon, salons throughout the US were desperate to get their hands on Olaplex. And once they managed to increase production to catch up with the demand, they were also able to capitalize on the brand's rapidly growing popularity. In July of 2015, just a year after launching, The Cut reported that Olaplex could be found in over 100,000 salons. Initially, Olaplex was available exclusively to salons and hair care professionals, but Dean wasn't going to stop at just dominating in professional hair care. He also had his sights set on the home market. And it took a few years, but while the salons continued to expand, Dean and his team were working on at-home versions of their products in the background. Finally, in 2018, they launched their #3 hair perfector, #4 Bond maintenance shampoo, and #5 Bond maintenance conditioner. This finally allowed fans of the brand to get the bond building effects of Olaplex without having to go to a salon. Gonna cut in here with my own personal experience. When I worked in a salon, we were an Olaplex salon. We actually would not bleach hair or touch damaged hair without using Olaplex. It became a must-have because of how effective these in-salon versions were. People loved it, they were buying it out of the salon, and I did find it kind of strange when people started using it at home, especially when they didn't have colored hair, but we'll talk about that soon. Unsurprisingly, the at-home range was an instant hit, quickly becoming Sephora's best-selling hair products. From there, the brand's popularity just grew steadily through word of mouth, which had been their main marketing strategy ever since they launched. Right from the start, they relied pretty much solely on the praise of industry-leading colorists, stylists, and celebrities, and other hair care professionals to talk about their products. And it was a strategy which had worked incredibly well so far for the brand. So when they expanded outside of salons, they didn't see any need to change tactics. They simply let the product's efficacy speak for itself, trusting that when people used it and saw results, they'd rave about it to everybody else they knew. And this very simple word of mouth marketing made Olaplex one of the biggest names in the hair care industry by the end of the early 2020s. And in 2021, they achieved annual sales of nearly $600 million. But there was still room for growth, and the brand's popularity was about to skyrocket even further. Olaplex was already reasonably popular on TikTok. As such a huge name in hair care anyway, it was obviously being talked about by a lot of people. It had even been part of a viral trend with the Olaplex bun beauty hack, which was all over the platform at one point. But when the brand noticed the potential of TikTok's reach, they gave things a small nudge, which would send things into overdrive. Olaplex launched their first official TikTok hashtag challenge in August of 2020. The hashtag Olaflex campaign encouraged Olaplex users to showcase their hair transformations using the brand's products. It piggybacked on the Olaplex bun's popularity and helped extend the brand's virality. The hashtag challenge gained the brand 3 billion views within just 3 days. Hair influencers and beauty creators on TikTok were now shown off dramatic before and after transformations transformations using Olaplex at a ridiculous rate. The brand was already a powerhouse in the hair industry, but TikTok helped increase their reach to an even broader audience. Chapter 3: Acquisitions and Going Public. By the end of 2020, Olaplex was at its peak in popularity, and all this success over the years hadn't gone unnoticed. In fact, they had caught the eye, the attention even, of some of the biggest names in beauty right at the start of this journey. Back in May of 2015, less than a year after their launch, Olaplex entered discussions with L'Oreal regarding a potential acquisition. Now, we're all used to L'Oreal buying out up-and-coming brands, right? But this time, they didn't even bother with that. They didn't even bother. After 4 months of negotiating, L'Oreal decided to call the deal off. They were like, no. Then, less than a year later, they released several products which were suspiciously similar to Olaplex's products. Obviously, Olaplex weren't very happy about this and took L'Oreal to court, accusing them of stealing trade secrets during the acquisition negotiations. The case dragged on for years and years, as usual, but eventually in September 2019, a jury found L'Oreal guilty of trade secret theft, patent infringement, and breach of contract. They ruled that L'Oreal would have to pay Olaplex $91 million in damages, and included that they believe L'Oreal's acts were intentional, not just some big misunderstanding. After all that drama was out of the way, Olaplex did actually finalize a deal for private equity firm Advent International to acquire the brand in November of 2019, hoping that with their new backing, they would be able to accelerate the brand's growth and global reach. I mean, looking at the figures, I'd say it worked out for them. Olaplex's revenue grew by 90% in 2020, and in the first 6 months of 2021, they brought in $270 million, which was just $12 million less than they made in the whole of 2020. And just 7 years after they launched, Olaplex was actually valued at $15 billion after the brand went public at the end of September of 2021. And of course, the brand just continued to grow from there. They had come a very long way in such a short space of time, from cooking up formulas in a hot plate in a garage to being valued at $15 billion and reaching their highest ever net sales of $704 million in 2022. That is so much in such a short amount of time. Unfortunately, this was the peak for Olaplex, as sales would start to drop the very next year as several controversies and criticisms started to erode consumer trust in the brand. Chapter 4: What went wrong? Olaplex's problems started as far back as September of 2020, when the EU ruled that cosmetic companies would have to stop using an ingredient called Lilial by March of 2022. And this ban was put into place because of concerns that Lilial may be linked to infertility. Lilial, which is also known as butyl phenyl methylpropionol, is a fragrance used in a lot of cosmetics and household cleaning products. However, a scientific committee on consumer safety for the European Commission found in a 2019 study that the fragrance cannot be considered as safe because it was proved to adversely affect reproductivity. I'm just stating the fact here. Whether that's accurate or not, Olaplex was obviously dragged into the drama surrounding this finding because their hugely popular No. 3 hair perfector contained this ingredient. This was obviously a big problem as the hair perfector was a bestseller for the brand, so the idea that it might cause fertility issues was incredibly damaging to the brand's image. In response to the news, Olaplex and a fair amount of other scientists pointed out some of the issues with the study's findings and questioned whether the findings even transferred reliably to humans. In the study, a high dose of Lilial was given to male rats to eat, and it was found that some rats suffered reproductive issues. It's always the way, isn't it? They fed an ingredient, a ridiculous amount of ingredient to a rat, they got cancer or faced some issues, so now it must be banned. But Olaplex CEO Ju Wong released a statement saying that Lilial was only used in their hair perfector for fragrance purposes at a concentration of 0.0119% and that it wasn't an active or functional ingredient. Whereas the ingredient was given to rats in ridiculously large amounts which weren't realistic in the real world. As always, it's just... She also pointed out that the study had rats ingest Lilial, whereas that isn't what humans do. She said, you don't eat your shampoo, you rinse it off. with countless hair care experts, scientists, cosmetic chemists, and dermatologists also coming out to support Olaplex and questioning the validity of the study. They pointed out that no studies have been conducted on the effects that Lilial has on human reproductivity, and categorically confirmed that Olaplex number 3 would not cause fertility issues in humans. But although so many experts confirmed that this study was bad science, a lot of damage was already done. Social media can help build your brand, but it can also help tear it down. The Lilial controversy spread as quickly on TikTok as the Olaplex bun trend had, and it caused major concerns for many people on the app, with once loyal, very loyal customers completely swearing off Olaplex over fears that it might cause infertility issues. It was this loss of trust in the brand, regardless of whether the concerns were valid or not, which ultimately led to Olaplex eventually removing Lilial from the number 3 hair perfector, not just in Europe, but everywhere. The brand also decided to spend $4.3 million to dispose of existing stock containing Lilial, and to calm people's fears, Olaplex hosted live Q&As on Instagram and TikTok hosted by medical experts not affiliated with the brand. CEO Ju Wang said there was so much misinformation online and on social media. What bothered us was that so many women were mentally impacted by it. The idea that they were worrying about contact with an ingredient that they thought could potentially cause them all these problems. But honestly, the controversy largely died down after the ingredient was removed, and it seemed like Olaplex was kind of like in the clear, with sales numbers actually improving again. But the controversy surrounding the brand wasn't over yet. In fact, it was about to get a whole lot worse. On February the 9th of 2023, 28 women filed a lawsuit claiming that Olaplex's products caused hair damage, hair loss, breakage, bald spots, and scalp irritation. The lawsuit accused Olaplex of false advertising, saying that the brand's claims that their products could repair hair damage, create strong, healthy-looking, more resilient hair, and that they were the ultimate breakage insurance were all deceptive and misleading. The lawsuit actually claims that most of these women lost half of their hair, and if they didn't lose half of their hair, they were suffering from bald spots, that their hair was left dry, brittle, frizzy, and dull, and that one plaintiff said the hair has split and broken, causing it to look kept as if it were cut with a weed whacker. Some of the women have also experienced extreme itchiness, rashes, yeast infections, bacterial infections, burning, open sores, and as a result, depression, according to the legal documents. Amy Davis, the lawyer involved in this lawsuit, claims that when the women involved stopped using Olaplex products, their hair conditions immediately improved. Together, the plaintiffs were asking for $75,000 in damages, which seems actually pretty low for this kind of lawsuit. Olaplex obviously denied these claims, with Wang saying this has gotten to a point where we have to react. Hair loss is a very stressful and emotional issue. I feel very responsible as a CEO that this is causing anxiety and it's not necessary. We need to defend ourselves. This is a frivolous lawsuit. Wang pointed out that the brand has undergone rigorous human repeat insult patch tests, I think that's what it's called, which are the FDA standard on all their products to ensure that they're safe to use on the skin, essentially, and hair follicles, of course. Additionally, Olaplex publicly released their HRIPT tests for all their products on their websites to demonstrate the safety of Olaplex products for consumers who might be questioning using these products ever again, or while the brand was going through this lawsuit. Wang said that the company has gone above and beyond industry beauty standards by sharing test results from its independent third-party laboratories on its website. Davis, the lawyer, criticized the testing referenced by Wang, saying that companies are able to declare their products safe after conducting tests using very little of the product on the hair. She said it's kind of like if you put a drop of the product in the ocean, of course no one is going to have a response. But yet again, most experts appear to have sided with Olaplex, saying that it's very unlikely that Olaplex is causing hair damage or hair loss. In an article for Refinery 29, Dr. William Yates, a hair loss expert, said that it's very difficult to narrow down hair loss to a single cause, but the most common cause of hair loss in men and women is genetics. Although he does add that a variety of factors have been linked to hair loss, including hormone disruptions like pregnancy and menopause, stress, nutrient deficiencies, autoimmune disorders, and certain medications. But no studies have been done shown that any of the ingredients in Olaplex may cause hair loss. Others have pointed out that many consumers fail to follow the directions for using Olaplex, often using their products far more regularly and leaving them in for much longer than instructions say you should. The Olaplex bun trend is particularly guilty of this one. And like we see very often in these lawsuits, it usually is user error. I mean, even when Olaplex became available outside of salon use, I was watching people use this online. I was like, why are these people using Olaplex? Like, some people just don't need to use it. It was very, very strange. So it sounds like even if Olaplex was to blame for the hair loss experienced by these women, it would likely have been very difficult to prove that Olaplex alone was at fault, right? But unfortunately, we never got the chance to find out. In the months after the lawsuit was first filed, the number of plaintiffs grew over 100 and was even proposed as a class action lawsuit. But US District Judge R. Gary Klosner ruled that the claims were too different for it to be a class action lawsuit, and the first named plaintiff dismissed her case without prejudice, effectively ending the lawsuit before it could go to trial. Chapter 5. Aftermath of the controversy. Regardless of the fact that the lawsuit never really went anywhere, just the news of it and the stories that you see circling everywhere had a very negative impact on Olaplex. The brand's sales and the value of its share price took a sharp decline. Sales dropped by 22% after the hair loss lawsuit, and their stock price dropped by 76% since they went public in 2021. The lawsuit created a widespread fear of Olaplex products, causing a lot of at-home customers to stop buying Olaplex altogether, while many salons and hairdressers stopped using Olaplex out of concern that it could lead to a lawsuit against them if the customer experienced issues after an in-salon treatment. And to be honest, it's kind of understandable that people were scared to buy Olaplex products. Stories of negative reactions people had experienced began to spread all over the internet. On TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, pretty much every social media site featured people sharing their emotional and painful stories of hair loss caused by Olaplex. A Facebook page called Olaplex Hair Loss Hair Damage, which is dedicated to people sharing their hair loss stories from using Olaplex, now has over 19,000 members. The group encourages anyone to join and support its mission to bring awareness to Olaplex hair loss issues and emphasizes the need for customers to do their own research before selecting hair products. The Olaplex website, as well as major retailers that carry Olaplex products like Sephora and Ulta, started seeing a large increase in negative reviews for the brand, which had previously been fairly unanimously loved by pretty much everyone. The brand's image and trust was significantly damaged by all the negative press. Like, who's gonna risk losing their hair, right? No one. No one. If you're not sure whether you should keep using or even start using Olaplex products after controversy, then one of my favorite creators, Abby Young, has a great video on the controversy, whether you should keep using the brand, and if so, how you should be using the products correctly. I believe it's called We Need to Talk About Olaplex. Chapter 6. Where Olaplex goes from here. This is still pretty current. By the end of 2024, Olaplex was still feeling the effects of the negative press they'd been receiving. Their overall sales were still lower than they had been prior to the lawsuit, and professional salon sales specifically were down by almost 20%. Overall, the brand had net sales of $422 million in 2024. Still a lot of money for sure, but it was a lot less than the $704 million they recorded in 2022. That's a 40% decrease in just 2 years. This was all after the brand doubled their marketing budget in the wake of the lawsuit, attempting to reset the narrative around the brand through widespread billboard advertising, increased advertising in stores like Sephora and Ulta Beauty, and a rapid response social media team. According to CEO Ju Wong, the company wanted to correct misinformation more vocally and faster than they had done previously. But it doesn't seem to have been a strategy that really worked for them though, and Ju Wong stepped down as CEO at the end of 2023, being replaced by former Supergoop CEO Amanda Baldwin. Now, in an attempt to combat their worrying decline under Amanda Baldwin's leadership, Olaplex underwent a rebranding campaign at the start of 2025, unveiling a refreshed brand identity focused on foundational hair health and stylist-led innovation, though it all kind of looks like the same to me. Leaning towards stylists again is probably a good idea for the brand, seeing as they've had such a massive dip in salon sales recently. That can help bring some of that market back to the brand, potentially. They've also introduced a new scalp serum with their rebrand. The No. 5 Scalp Longevity Treatment is apparently designed to strengthen, hydrate, and balance the scalp barrier microbiome. The brand says it wants to evolve and is evolving beyond just hair repair to providing a holistic approach to strengthening and maintaining hair health. But is that enough in today's market? For a long time, Olaplex dominated because their products were the most effective at what they did. Probably the only products around at the time that did it. But recently, genuine competitors have come into the market like K18 and Redken Bonding. So do you think a rebrand and launching new products can turn things around for Olaplex? Have you been put off by all the hair loss stories floating around on the internet? Or are there just better alternatives on the market now?